All right, rounding numbers. What do we mean by rounding numbers? We mean that we're going to round numbers to a certain place on that number. All right, so in this lesson, we're going to learn how to round whole numbers and we're going to learn how to round decimals because there is a little bit of a change in the names of the positions of the numbers, whether you are to the left or right of the decimal place. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at whole numbers. Okay, now you'll notice each one of these numbers has a different color to it, and I kind of did that to color code things because if we look at all the way over here, let me gain my place again. There we go. Because if we look at over here, we can see that we have 1,265,127. Well, you see, the 7 is the ones position, the 2 is the tens, and then I have hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. And of course, then if I expanded the number more, I'd have 10 millions, 100 millions, billions, 10 billion, 100 billions, trillions, and things like that. But I didn't want to use a number that big for this demonstration. All right. Now, what exactly do we do when we round a number? Well, there's a couple steps we got to go through. All right. We want to find the place you want to round to, which is the rounding number. We look at the number to the right. If that number is less than 5, then change all numbers to the right to 0. If that number is equal to or greater than 5, then add 1 to the rounding number and change all numbers to the right to 0. And we're going to go through a couple of examples of this. All right. So what I want to do is I want to round 774 to the nearest tens place. Well, if we remember that the tens place is right here, that 7 right next to the 4. And let me see if I can get my ink going here. There we go. That's good right there. That's the 7 we're concerned about right there. So what we do is we know we want to round to the tens place. So we look to the number to the right. If it's less than 5, then we change all numbers to the right of the rounding number to 0, which in this case it is. So this number, when rounded to the nearest tens, would be 770 or 770. All right. So we're just following the steps. That's all you got to do in math is follow the steps. Second example, we're going to say 886 to the nearest tens. Okay. So is my ink still on? Yep, my ink is still on. Okay. So the nearest tens. So I'm going to look at the tens position, which is this 8 right here. I'm going to look one number to the right, which is 6. 6 is greater than or equal to 5. So I'm going to add 1 to my rounding number and change all numbers to the right of the rounding number to 0, which is going to be 890. All right, or 890 if I round it to the nearest tens. We got another example here of 125 to the nearest tens. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let me get my eraser going here. What if no, I don't got an eraser. Okay, great. So I'm still going to use this. I'm going to change the color to black. Here we go. So 125 to the nearest tens. The tens position is the number 2. So I'm going to look one number over to the right. That number is 5 or greater. So I'm going to add 1 to my rounding number. And I'm going to change all the other numbers to the right of the rounding number to 0. So in this case, 125 rounded to the nearest tens place would be 130. All right, decimals. Decimals are a little tricky because you're going to the right of the decimal point. Okay? Now, we have the number 1 here is the tenths position. Notice how it's TENTHS, tenths, as in 1/10 of something. All right, 1/10 of a dollar is a dime. We're not going to worry about the 0 to the left of the decimal point. He doesn't matter at this point. The number 2 is the hundredths position. Then I have the thousandths position, the 10,000ths position, the 100,000ths position, and the millionths position. And of course, I could have 10 millionths, 100 millionths, 1 billionth, 10 billionths, 100 billionths, and just get smaller and smaller and smaller the further I go to the right of the decimal point. Okay? Now, notice how there's no once position. This just doesn't happen to the right of the decimal point. Okay, we start out with tenths, we go to hundredths, we go to thousandths, we go to 10,000ths, 100,000ths, and millionths. All right, let's run through some examples of this. There we go. And we got our rules for rounding decimals. It's kind of the same as the rules for rounding whole numbers. We find the place we want to round to. We look at the number to the right. If that number is less than 5, then change all numbers to the right to 0. If that number is equal to or greater than 5, then add 1 to the rounding number and drop all numbers to the right of the rounding number. Okay, let's run through some examples here. All right, 0.1023 to the nearest thousands. Well, we know that the thousandths is right here, is that number 2. So we're going to look to the number to the right. We're going to see that that number is less than 5. So we are just going to leave that as 0.102. All right, we don't need to add the 0 here. That's not necessary. Let me change my thing to red here. We don't need to add the 0 there. That's really not necessary most of the time because you can add as many zeros to the right as you want. It doesn't change the value of the number at all. Okay, those zeros are insignificant. Let's look at another example here. There we go. 0.9876 to the nearest thousandths. Okay, so we know that the thousandths is that 7 right there. We're going to look one number to the right. It's greater than 5. So we're going to add 1 to that number there. And we're going to drop all the other numbers to the right of the rounding number. So this is going to be here we go. Point. Tried to get a decimal point there. It didn't work. 0.988. All right. 0.988 or 988 thousandths. There you go. I think we're going to do one more example here, which is 0.6925 to the nearest thousandths. And of course, this applies to the tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, whatever decimal point you're going to. So we can see, we know that the 6 is the tens, the 9s is the hundreds, the 2 is the thousands. I'm going to look to the number to the right of it, and it's 5 or greater. So I'm going to add 1 to my rounding number, and that's going to be 0.693. Let me get my decimal point right there. There we go, or 693 thousandths. And that is how you round numbers. Any questions or comments, just put it in the comments below. Thank you for watching.